Now we're going to begin with feedback from the group discussion sessions. We have keynote listeners who are going to give 2 to 3 actions or policy recommendations that emerged from those exchanges. And then I'm going to get reactions from our stakeholder panel. So I'm hoping that our stakeholder panel, our panelists have all been mic'd up. So please now, could you join me on stage? Grauwels from the Flemish Land Agency in Belgium, Hilkka Vihinen from the Luke Institute in Finland, Ben van Essen from the European Rural Parliament and ERCA, Anita Seļicka from the Latvian Rural Forum, and Charlene Lambert from the Women Entrepreneurship Platform. You're all very welcome. Make yourselves comfortable. Have you all got water? You have. And is Charlene? Oh, Charlene, hello. We've spoken many times over the last couple of days. You're very welcome. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to have our first keynote listener. Spyros Papadatos is from the Rural Youth Europe from Greece, and this is part of the Sustainability and Resilience block. Spyros was following the group discussions related to attractive and inclusive rural societies, making rural areas attractive places for young generations, which was in the morning, and then in the afternoon, building inclusive rural communities. Okay, Spyros, I'm going to hand over the lectern to you. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back here. It's much warmer than the tents. We really froze out there in the tents. I don't know how we survived. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and to try to transmit to you the recommendations of the 2 groups that I followed, with the first one being the youth one, which I'm also very passionate about, being a rural young person myself. So let me just get myself a clicker. Okay, so you can see here the recommendations that we developed. And the first one is relating to participation and decision-making mechanisms. The first recommendation reads as incentivize spaces, structures, and mechanisms for the engagement and participation of rural youth at the local, national, and European levels. And for that, we identified a policy gap. There is a substantial policy gap regarding rural youth. In most countries, this group is not explicitly acknowledged when it comes to as a distinct policy category. We are often absorbed in broader rural development or youth policies, which frequently fail to address their specific circumstances. And actually, there is a weird phenomenon because the youth policies think, oh, it's rural youth, so let them the rural policies deal with them. On the other hand, the rural policies think, oh, they're rural youth, so let them be dealt by the youth policies. And then we're in a kind of limbo. That leads me also to the second recommendation that our group produced, which relates to strategy, and we think that there is a need for a European strategy on rural youth as a standalone youth group covering from EU to national to the local levels. And again, something that was observed in a recent study that was conducted by the European Union is the one-off approach. There are many initiatives and projects which are driving change with rural youth and beyond, but these are usually very fragmented. They're one-off activities, and there is no coordination. They're very weakly coordinated. And to strengthen their effectiveness, we really think that we need to have a compass, a vision, a strategy that should be European-wide, but would obviously go down to the national and local levels, because if European policies are not implemented at the national and local level, they're just letters on a paper. And also in that framework to incentivize public authorities to create integrated strategies after doing a territorial analysis, what are the opportunities and what are the gaps, and to ultimately how to come up with youth attractiveness package and measures. And the very last one is investing in holistic and cross-sectional funding initiatives that make rural areas attractive for rural youth to stay, to invest, and to thrive in rural areas. And we think of it as a full circle closing. If you look at the other 2 priorities as well, in order to realize them, we're missing the tools and the resources that are necessary to be invested. So funding, obviously we're going to bring up the money. Funding to improve infrastructure and access to opportunities for rural youth on one hand, but also to create both capacity building initiatives and to enhance the sustainability of them through the necessary resources for them to have a lasting effect. So these are the recommendations for the rural youth group. We hope we captured them as best as possible. There were a lot of discussions, and for sure they will be transmitted also to the report.
Excellent, Spyros. Thank you so much for that and for sticking to the time and so beautifully summarizing really interesting points. Thank you very much.
I have one more for
Oh, sorry,
the other
I
group.
thought, oh my
The
God, I
second
thought,
group.
okay, yes. Oh no, you have building inclusive rural communities. Yes.
I drank a lot of coffee, so I did 2 groups. I was very energized. Okay, so we're going now to group 2, to the inclusive rural communities. And here I will be very brief. So the first recommendation is to create place-based and community-sensitive plans and spaces to integrate newcomers and vulnerable groups developed by the rural communities themselves. We really want to stress this co-creation element, this co-management measurement, because rural communities need to be able to bring up the issues that they face, and they need to make tailored solutions co-created also by them. Next, to promote care and mental health protection initiatives and campaigns for all vulnerable groups of rural citizens to counter stigma and create community-driven solutions. Still, these topics are bringing a particular stigma. Rural young citizens and rural citizens are not just rural, they also bring other intersecting identities, women, LGBTQI+, people with disabilities. So we want to highlight that this should be for all vulnerable groups of rural citizens. And last but not least, to increase free and affordable empowerment opportunities for rural women, from participation to entrepreneurship, and to integrate a gender perspective in rural policies. I don't think I need to explain much about this priority. I think it's very evident also from previous findings that we discussed at the opening plenary of our conference and in the working groups. I will not take more time. I try to be as efficient as possible.
Brilliant. You did a great job, Spyros. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really excellent points and so relevant. So now we're going to go to our next keynote listeners. So if you could come up to the podium, Karen Keaveney from University College Dublin. And Karen was following the group discussions on resilience and services. The first one, empowering local communities to enhance resilience, which was in the morning. And the second, ensuring the right to stay in rural areas, which was in the afternoon. Karen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the first group was empowering local communities to enhance resilience. And there was a lot of common threads among the 5 groups that worked within that. The first being capacity building and one-stop shop. I think that comes up at every rural Pact conference and event that I'm at. But it was very, very clear in terms of the capacity building should be provided on a localised, on-the-ground support for both communities and local authorities in understanding bottom-up processes. So it's particularly around training actors on how to use existing toolkits and also supporting communities to self-assess. Also, networking came up a lot, and we talked about networking, experience exchange, and rural Erasmus. Looking at sharing and learning from good and bad practices, so sharing the good with the bad, and also conveying the rural message. Really, a lot of the groups talked about the narrative that we have around the rural and looking at potential and opportunity. And finally, in this group, ring-fencing dedicated funding instruments for particular areas and particular sectors, and particularly around functional rural areas, border areas in particular, and looking at systematic bottom-up approaches for all plans at local levels, potentially looking at multi-annual approaches, and also providing small-scale funding and also funding to scale up. Later in the afternoon, in the next group, we looked at ensuring the right to stay in rural areas. And really, the key here is about not reinventing the wheel. Vice President Fito yesterday talked about the right to stay strategy, and really the long-term vision for rural areas very much ties in with that, because the right to stay strategy is about jobs, services, sustainability. It's about putting all the enabling factors and conditions in to support the right to stay and, of course, the right to return, which is key. So we really have an opportunity to turn the long-term vision for rural areas into a concrete strategy around the right to stay. Key among all of the groups was enabling conditions, and that's really what everyone talked about. So we talked a lot around spaces for innovation and collaboration, so similar to Spyros and talking about youth. We talked about providing spaces, but also providing experimental spaces, sandboxes as such, where people can take risks and explore different opportunities in rural areas. Health services, e-health was discussed quite a bit, and also as well as providing health services for rural residents, also supporting health practitioners and professionals to access research and innovation infrastructure in rural areas so that we incentivise health professionals to potentially move further out from urban areas. And enabling spaces is key, as already mentioned, spaces for youth, multi-service hubs, really simplifying access to small funding. Remember, Lena yesterday talked about the difference small communities can make with small funding, and they can make a big, big difference. And of course, housing was discussed in a major way as well, but generally around that area, looking at innovation or renovation and retrofitting of public buildings and houses and family homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Really great points again. So what we're going to do now is just get some reaction from some of our panelists. From the Public Authority, Kevin Grauwels, you're from the Flemish Land Agency in Belgium. Maybe I'll go to you first. Of either the ones Karen presented or Spyros, what recommendations struck you the most, and maybe explain why?
I think what they raised all interesting points. What struck me the most was what they didn't say. As what for me was also a key element in these discussions is intergovernmental cooperation, and looking at the right level to enable things. For example, if you talk about accessibility to services, it's often linked to mobility, because I think we cannot say that every service can be provided in every village, but then they need to be accessible in a network. So in my opinion, I think you need municipal cooperation, inter-municipal cooperation, talking about what can a local authority do themselves, because it's also a matter of local capacity. What are they doing in cooperation with each other? And let's not forget that as a public authority at the national or regional level, I think it's important not to stay in your main capital, but also have that place-based approaches in your general policies. So be also, as a public authority, have your boots on the ground.
Yes, because that might be particularly important when you look at establishing maybe greater mobility, greater transport networks. We heard a lot about that yesterday, didn't we, in the fact that it can take people so long to go from one rural area to something else, be it a service or a GP. And you're right, you need local government really, don't you, if you're going to roll out more buses, for example, or other forms of transport.
Yeah, I think that is what, in my opinion, is lacking. It's the cooperation between different levels. For example, in Flanders, we are now developing a rural pact, and it's very difficult to engage, for example, the Ministry of Mobility into taking action for rural communities. So if we can go to a model where those cooperations are standard, and where, for example, I think it was also one of the actions mentioned in one of the groups this morning, if you have an overall strategy where different municipalities cooperate, maybe it's easier you should make it easier to get access to funding at the national or regional level if you have such instruments.
If you have that, yes. Okay, very good, very interesting observation. I'm going to go to you, Anita Seļicka, representing a local action group. You're from the Latvian Rural Forum. Again, maybe you might like to comment on the points that Karen and Spyros made, and maybe Could you add or challenge some of the main points that have been reported on? Or perhaps you agree with them all?
Yes, I think I tend to agree of them all, but there is missing maybe some concreteness to really, in some of the points, to really push exactly what do we want. And it would strike me what was said about the compass. And I was just recently discussing, not in a context of youth, but about the compass, because Spyros said that we need this strategy for youth, having the clear direction where we are going. And I don't know, how do you use, all of you, the digital maps when you need to get somewhere? Do you keep always north on the top of the map? Or do you have those maps that, switch towards where you go, that you always go, and the north is always where you are walking? What I mean is we tend to do the same with our strategies, I think, so that we have some kind of vision, and we are turning like our digital maps that the north is following, where we are, where is the least resistance. And because it's a bit harder also on a map to see, to go, to understand left or right. And that's something I think from the youth perspective, and I would also put it even in any perspective that also was said just now about the moving vision into the strategy and getting everyone on a board and having the same compass that we don't have in pocket, but really we have in front of the eyes and cars and safely, with a freehand system, so that we know where we are going. Because at the moment, it's true, I can agree with Kevin, it's so fragmented, and it's so hard work also for us, the local action groups and as a civic society, to get everyone on board, to sometimes convince of the obvious. I mean, isn't the mobility or the transport or the health or the welfare part of the rural? And I want also to touch the sandboxes that were just mentioned, the sandbox principle to allow to experiment. I think that's very, very important, because we are always, when we tend to go to our municipalities or to ministry, we are asked the question, how much? The local action goes, they have the limited budget, you cannot solve all the problems, and then you go and they're like, how much do you need? Like, what are the additional resources? And I think it's already years when we say to the local and national level that we are not just, we don't spend the money, we actually can help save public money by finding the new ways, the innovations, how to, for example, ensure the public services with a transport on demand, or the community services, or everyone else. And then if you would count the budget, the impact on budget, it would free the resources. So I think that's something we really need to use more widely and learn from each other, to be more brave to use those sandboxes, and yes, the strategies, the place-based strategies that it was said, that are community sensitive, as it has said, the plans, and cross-sectorial, that we have beyond that northern direction also the clear actions that we are maybe even forced to sign up once we have the mandate to act on a certain themes.
Okay, very good, Anita, very good summary. Thank you very much for that. And I see you were taking copious notes. Ben van Essen, if I can go to you, representing civil society organizations, and you're with the European Rural Parliament in the Netherlands. Maybe first you could just give an overview of the points made, and maybe perhaps you could give us an idea of what might be needed now to act on some of the several recommendations that have been made.
Yeah. Well, let me start at first by complimenting people in the creativity coming up with these points, because that was, of course, the objective today, to take a step forward and not only think of the big ideas, but also how do we come there. And of course, there is a lot of work to do when I look at these things, but I like very much what I see. And a second thing for me, being a person from the civil society, is what I like very much, that this is much about the power that is in the community selves. They can and should shape their own future. like of course Karen said, the community self-assessment, ways that communities find their own ways in building their own future. And that was also in the youth issues that I think it is also much about giving the people themselves the instruments, and also the groups were talking about empowerment, about capacity building. These things can help very much to make it possible that people from the ground find the solutions that are here at the stage. A second thing, I found it interesting, that this thing of places, having the right places to come together, to be creative, to find solutions, and bring support for these. I think that's an interesting concept. It helps very much when for young people or for all other people, create spaces where this process of building your own future can happen. And the last thing, what I also liked, is that they talked all about the level from Europe to national to local. And this local level is very important for me, because I think we should really hook up with all these marvelous things that are going on, because this was also a day where we again hear all these stories from people, what they bringing up on the local level. So the fact that we also connect to this local level is for me an important other issue that I heard, a good thing that I heard in all the stories.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for that. Did you want to say anything else before we move forward? No, very good. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next segment and our next two keynote listeners. They're going to give us feedback on the second block of discussions, which were on competitiveness. I'm going to invite our first keynote listener now to come up on stage, Jone Fernandez from the Hazi Foundation in Spain. And Jone was following the group discussions on rural society in the digital era, which was in the morning, and then in the afternoon, the one on boosting innovative and competitive rural economies and businesses. Jone, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. So as far as Group 1 is concerned, the topic was rural society in the digital area. We are all very aware of the big efforts both the European Commission, our national governments, and both regional institutions and local administration are doing on this topic in order to reduce the gap between urban and rural areas, but there's still lots to do. So I would like to point some important questions about digital infrastructure, how important it is to advocate the need to reserve frequencies for 5G deployment for local use in rural areas. What we mean by that, it is very important that these frequencies are not allocated especially only to big companies that maybe prefer to go to urban areas, but to leave also some space for rural areas, because otherwise, for example, precision farming was not going to be possible to develop. So we consider it very important. On the other hand, we consider also very important to declare connectivity as a service of general economic interest for addressing the last mile challenge. We are very aware also that nowadays in many European regions, the problems are in this last mile challenge. Places which are remote, in mountains, etc., where it is not very easy to access. So we consider it very important to have this opportunity to consider them as service of general economic interest. And the third point is related to also declaring 5G, for example, such as a public infrastructure for that last mile. And I think that it was also very important what we talked about digital skills and technology transfer. So we consider it important, for example, that the European Action Plan could develop a new pilot project to test a voucher system for rural municipalities to enhance their digital skills and the deployment of technology for the provision of public services. So there were many other interesting ideas, but we thought that these ones were like the most important ones and quite, let's say, feasible to push forward from the Rural Pact. And as far as the Group 5 is concerned, we tackled the topic on boosting innovative and competitive rural economies and businesses. And the actions we have chosen to present and to share with you are these ones. First one, to improve data. We have talked a lot these 2 days about the importance of data, collecting data and using it for the purpose of the rural development. So improve data on rural businesses, including crafts, social economy, to better inform support systems, so to better help then develop new ideas, innovation, and new businesses in rural areas. It's also important to improve opportunities for networking, thematic collaboration, give advice, mentoring, and foster exchanges of best practices across Europe, putting a special focus also on women and young people. As we were talking before, they are vulnerable groups. We know women still lag behind in many businesses. They are not in the boards, and there's lots of support that they need, as young people also do. So special focus on that. And to finish, we also propose to build a holistic approach to crafts and industrial GIs in the framework of rural development, mapping the potential for products and raising awareness on the possibilities created by the new legislation. We are aware that this is like a very new concept. There's still lots to do, but we think that it is also very important to provide with this support to many new products and maybe contribute also to the economic development of rural areas. That's all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jone. Thank you so much. Again, really excellent summary, and I know how hard it is to try and harvest so many views that came out in just a couple of points, so you did it beautifully. Our final speaker is Simone Sterly from the Institute for Rural Development Research in Germany. Simone was looking at rural areas as key players in the energy transition in the morning, and in the afternoon, the one on driving local prosperity through the bioeconomy. Simone, you're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And it was indeed a very challenging task. Yeah. But the interesting thing is, because I looked at the green transition part of these working groups, there was a common theme, and that was make rural people benefit from the green transition. And I want to point that out as my major finding for what I heard. So from the first group on rural areas as key players for energy transitions, we looked at energy communities, access to energy services, and also on ways to boost the CCAP in rural areas. And so our first recommendation would be to create awareness on climate risks, particularly at the local level. And for that, we could have some guidance and support to create local awareness and on climate risk and also on potentials of energy communities to drive climate action also through mobile one-stops, which we heard already this morning, but not this morning, but in the earlier session. There was a very innovative idea to have, for example, industrial containers as a mobile solution that can travel from one rural area to another. Then, of course, the transition would also need to have a removal of legal barriers, bureaucratic burdens, and a redesign on unfavorable tax systems. We learned that the situations in the different member states is quite different, and so there's not one recommendation that we can give, but we would advocate for EU-wide regulation that enable local markets for produced energy and also access to grids. And also, we would promote to foster rural proofing of all energy-related policies and a social proofing of rural policies to make sure that also the vulnerable groups in rural areas benefit from energy services. And the last recommendation from that group is also to build capacities and networks, fostering access to knowledge and the use of existing tools. We acknowledge that there's already a lot out there, but often it's a bit difficult for local actors to access this, so that could also happen through the one-stop shops. And these are, for example, the Rural Toolkit and also the existing knowledge platform for local actors. One thing that we would also think would help to boost this transition is organized visits and knowledge sharing with existing good practices. As we heard, there are already lot of good practices out there. And we also would promote to involve more relevant rural actors for energy transition in local rural pact, such as craftspeople, so people in charge of installing new energy systems or renovating houses, as this is not usually the key audience of this rural pact, but maybe that's an option we should think of. And of course, we also would promote to facilitate local rural pact events and foster an exchange from local to regional level in form of networking. That was the result from this group. And so I'm moving on to the next one directly. I have to press here, I think. No.
I think they had it actually up. Isn't this the next one?
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
think
someone
it's
did
up,
it already.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a very diverse group looking at different aspects of the bioeconomy. So there were bioregions as one perspective, bioeconomy plans, and then also ways to connect territory, food, and people. And also here, we would aim to foster education, capacity building, and awareness of consumers, policymakers, and basically everyone on the different aspects that relate to organic farming, food quality, and bioeconomy. And labeling or local currencies could be a way to increase this awareness about origins and territorial importance. Then, of course, there are also legal, regulatory, and administrative improvements that would help to foster a broad economy. And here, as an example, just a public procurement should make use of organic quality criteria and regional origin to boost these concepts in the regions. And then another idea would be to apply a biodiversity mainstreaming approach in the policy level as well. And then to strengthen the connection between the territories, food, and people, especially the production and the position of the farmer in the value chain, we would aim to do that and make sure that rural people benefit from the bioeconomy. And also a very important point that was raised at the end of our discussion is to retain the diversity of food and products across Europe, because that is a lot of a value that we have, and we shouldn't go for mainstreaming that as well. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simone. That was great. Thank you very much. So, thank you. You're free to go. Again, some very interesting recommendations from both groups. We'll get a quick reaction from our other, from two others and Anita as well. Hilkka, Vihinen, representing, I suppose, academia and researcher with the Luke Institute in Finland. Your reaction first, and anything in particular that struck you from the recommendations and the outputs from these groups?
From all?
No,
all
the two we've just heard from.
Okay. About the energy group, I found that recommendation on getting rid of these unsupportive, fragmented policy frameworks that don't reflect the rural needs that was discussed there. I think that this is very very relevant, especially because there is so much potential in this energy transition. But there are at the same time, there are national regulations, legislations, and practices which don't always go the same line with the EU regulations, and that causes a lot of problems at the grassroots level in rural areas, so that you can't do sensible things because there are some regulations, for example, as to taxation or pricing of electricity. And they are exactly problems for the rural areas, not for the urban areas. So here again, these are so complicated phenomena, and they need to be very regulated. So we would need rural proofing early enough in order to see where the where the possible potential problems lie. And that should be made both at the EU level, but also at the national level. And it's very important to get the national legislation in line with the EU legislation and vice versa.
Okay, thank you for that. Charlene, Lambert, if I can go to you next, sort of representing businesses, if you like. You're from the Women Entrepreneurship Platform. Anything in particular that struck you from the two sets of outputs that we've just heard about now?
So, well, first of all, this is the first time that I've been to the Rural Pact Conference, and I'm just overwhelmed by the creative talent in the room and the fact that we put these people from so many different disciplines together. I think we've come up with some really interesting solutions and ideas. I think in our group in particular, we found that there was a lack of skills, and digital, legal, business, and that the skills at the local level had to be improved, that people should be able to go to a certain office and say, I need help, and get some help. So I think the comment made about the GIs for rural women is particularly important. Many of these regions represent women who have been working for years in agriculture, in some type of agriculture, and they have a lot of know-how, and I think this concept would support them. They have. I think that the comment was made that rural people should benefit first of all. And I think that's a wonderful comment, and I think it matches what our speaker heard yesterday from, I believe she was from Lithuania, no.
Do you mean Lena?
Yes.
Yes.
She said if rural communities thrive, the EU will thrive.
Yes, that's right.
And that was a very similar type of comment, so I think, that's doubly interesting. In our group, we talked about rural incubators and incubator hubs, and the idea that some of these rural communities could have a hub where women and youth and anybody in particular could come to start a business. And so I think that's something that was missing. So
okay, I love the idea of the hubs. It's you do have some hubs in towns and less so in rural areas, and you can see how they could be so important. Thank you, Charlene. Anita, just very quickly, anything else that struck you from these sets of outputs?
I think these two sets were something that we have on our table daily: the rural energy communities, the food production, the services, tourism. All of those questions are on a table of most of the local action groups working. So I think this is the aspect of finding the best solutions in different places. But I really loved the stress that 5G is economic interest, because it's often seen that it's like, we are as rural people demanding and saying, we need services and please give us 5G, because, that's how we can be connected. I think it should really be seen as the economic interest, and that's something I think we need to talk more, because a lot of those solutions for the businesses and services are directly connected if we have or do not have access to the internet and good quality of the internet, because it also goes with possible newcomers. And just another thing that I didn't hear, but coming from Latvia, I all the time hear back home the question of resilience, of the local democracy, importance of local democracy, on the resilience for the communities to be able to react in a crisis situation, the climate crisis and food security and all those questions. And I think that that's something that's really important, that was touched about the unique local offer, the culture that goes to the identity, because if we really have the strong local identity and ties together, I think that also incredibly builds the resilience of the communities and also national security, because at the end of the day, especially to the eastern border of the European Union, we need to secure that in every household and make sure that it works that way. I think the neighbors from Baltic states, Finland and Poland, understand very well how important all these aspects, the energy, the food, the Wi-Fi and everything is for that. So I think that's very important what was raised.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to get more of your views now online and also in the room. There's a Slido question that we'd like you to, we'd like your input on. So if you could go to your Slido app, log on again, use the details there that you see on the screen. And again, like yesterday, and it was great to get the feedback yesterday, we'll have less time today, so try and get your answers, succinct answers to that question in over the next 5-10 minutes while I go back to our panelists for a few more views. But if you could answer that question, from everything you've heard during the conference, what's the one action or recommendation that you believe could have the greatest positive impact in rural areas? So just put in your answers, and then Patrizia is going to be monitoring the output. She did a brilliant job yesterday, and she'll be doing the same this time round, and she's going to give us a summary in a few minutes, and then also maybe take one or two comments from those of you here in the room and on not online, actually, we'll just get the comments from those in the room. So while you're answering that question, I want to maybe go back again to each one of you here and maybe put one or two questions to you. So maybe if I go back to you, Kevin, then, you've talked about sort of, I think, a main recommendation. So maybe if I put a different question to you, there have been many, many ideas and proposals discussed and recommended here over the last 2 days. I mean, we only have to see a brief snapshot of some of them in these slides. But how can we ensure that these wonderful ideas, the effort that's being put in to get, you know, as many ideas together and proposals, how can we make sure that they don't just stay at a conference level, but that in fact they could lead to policy that will impact positively on rural communities? We know there are so many changes coming ahead in terms of EU policies.
Okay, I think that's the million-dollar question, and maybe I'll try to answer it. First of all, maybe a key enabler lies in the people who are missing today, and we have a broad audience. A lot of local actors, rural actors. Maybe one key thing to do is at regional, national level, think about how can we include the policymakers in policy domains which are necessary to take the step further. For example, climate, mobility,
yes,
healthcare, education, and so on. Because without that discussion, it's... But
you don't necessarily need them physically in the room. What you might need, though, is a mechanism to ensure that the recommendations land up on their desk if they're going to be in charge of them.
Yeah, and then I think one thing maybe every member state, every region could do is to translate or to take up the EU Rural Vision or the EU Rural Pact and make it into a national or regional pact,
yes,
strategy, agenda, however you call it, in which you engage those policymakers on, for example, how we're doing it now in Flanders is we've started with bottom-up collecting the ideas. So how could the rural future be envisaged? What is necessary? And in next step, we will step to the different policy domains and, okay, with the question, what can you do about this?
Yes.
And what do you want to do? And then you can, I think, a key element in this is rural policies, the action. I think we discussed in the 2 days, we discussed a lot of place-based strategies, place-based approaches, and the action for rural is on the local level, but a national and a regional level really should be enabling things. with the ingredients which were discussed here.
Okay.
Rural proofing,
Yeah.
capacity building, funding, but
All of those
you have to have that integrated strategy to have everyone around the table.
Okay, very good. Hilkka, if I go to you maybe, what single recommendation or idea do you think that was shared, you heard maybe during the conference, whether through here or elsewhere, do you think could most effectively transform rural areas?
Well, I don't know if anyone has formulated it this way, but this is something that I have thought over a lot during these 2 days, and that has to do with the structural level. We have learned how to network. We have excellent projects and piloting things and so on. We're good at that, and we are very competent people, and we have all those crowds behind us. But now I think that we should get to the next level and pay more attention to structures, mechanisms, and practices in place, both in the EU, in the Commission, and in the member states. So where do we have such biased mechanisms which make rural areas underperform and which hinders them to show their whole potential, both as to economy and well-being? And by this, I refer to how we create mechanisms and how we decide upon regulations and laws where there have not been enough people who can think rural. So it's not something deliberate that our systems harm rural areas. It's just that human that it's happened. But what we now have to do is to valorize the human, the rural dimension in our doings. And I think that we are quite capable of doing it. Now, especially we have the Rural Observatory, and in many countries we also collect statistics, but we also need people who can interpret the numbers and the figures. And there I think that what we need to do has to do with what Kevin also said about formalizing and getting more power to the national rural pacts and the EU rural pacts, and start concentrating in the most biased problems, and then opening and modifying our practices and mechanisms. And what is good with this is that it doesn't normally need any extra money, because it's what we would do anyways, but we could do it better.
Yes, okay, very good. Ben, maybe the same question to you. Is there maybe one action or recommendation in particular, if you look at the question that we were asking people here to answer, that could have the greatest impact in rural areas?
Of course there is.
Oh, good.
Of course there
You
is.
can identify it, can you?
No, but I think I'm looking through the glasses of the civil society. And after today, after yesterday, my new hero is Lina, of course. And one of the things she said is, don't underestimate us. So what I have seen today and elsewhere, also on other places where I'll come as a member of ERCA, is this power of the local communities is very big, and we are the people that know the best what is necessary on this local level, and we are always the ones which also invest in finding these solutions. So I would say it would be good if the new action plan is a little bit more designed on this idea on what civil society, what all these groups, 10,000s of groups on the local level, what they have to offer, not only what they need, but also what they have to offer. That would be great. And in a few weeks, we will be together again in an even bigger audience with 400 people, 40 countries, European countries in Scotland on the European Rural Parliament. And the motto of the European Rural Parliament is local solutions for global as challenges. And that's precisely what I mean. On this local level, we find the solution. So it would be great. Of course, we need a lot of things, but it would be great if the action plan would shifting a little bit in that direction. And there's another thing in which I want to quote Lena. What she says is, come meet us halfway.
Yes.
So it's not that we ask, perhaps we should ask a little bit less on Europe for money, but come meet us halfway. We don't need always the millions, but
Yes.
the small amounts, we are the ones which make from €1.06.
Yes.
So thinking about how you can meet us halfway is an investment, and we, on the other hand, will also be creative in thinking of new ideas of funding. For instance, I like very much the idea of community funding like it is in Ireland or it is in Hungary. So we should also think about other ways of funding, less dependent on government and more depending on our own creativity. And let me end with one thing. If we do these things, for me, this right to stay, which is an interesting but also a dazzling motto, this right to stay can only be a good thing if it is the right to shape your own future.
Yeah, okay, excellent. I don't know if Lena is still in the room. She's been so, okay, very good. Yes, well done. Anita, just very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm conscious this slide that we're running out of time. It's flashing. You don't see it, but it's very disturbing to see it flashing at us. Anything in particular or one action that you think could be taken?
I cannot not say that a lot of people, a lot of local actors that I talked, not just Lena, said the huge support of the leader on helping them to stay, helping them to develop and do what's done. And I think it's also after we entered in 2004 European Union, we got a huge opportunities to be mobile, to open borders, the qualification of the same experts. You know, there is like the right to live, to work, to be everywhere in European Union. And I think we are lacking something as strong for the right to stay, not just for the right to move. Alternative strength, like as it would be. And I think the leader approach is given a lot. And we haven't met since mid-July when we got the MFF offer, and I was struck by how many of the colleagues and local players are worried that even though it says mandatory, it's not earmarked. And from the discussions have been in last 2 months with the local governments, it for a lot of countries means possibly not existent leader for all these different challenges that it's. So if one thing, that's earmarking a leader with a budget and not just inside the cap, but for all those things that we are talking here, the digitalization, the services, the health, the integration, all the other aspects, because that's what's bringing together all the levels from local grassroots to Europe and between the different sectors. And it's, worrying, of course.
It's very worrying. Okay, thank you. Charlene, we'll just get your final views to wrap up sort of the panel.
I get the last word.
You get the last word, which is a great position to be in. You can choose whatever you want now. You can answer that question there. What do you think is the one action or recommendation or a point that you feel would be very important to make at this stage?
Thank you so much. Well, I do have a very important point, and I would like to speak out on behalf of women, farmers, and rural women. They are fundamental to the health of the rural communities, and we have to give them more attention in terms of paying them for their work, helping them with getting daycare and childcare and elder care, and you know, those kinds of things are going to go a long way to to helping the communities thrive. If the women are happy,
The communities
EU
are
will be happy.
Yeah.
So that's my final word.
Wonderful. Well, that's a great point to leave us on. If you can just stay there for the moment while I'm going to hand over now to Patrizia, because she's been, again, harvesting the reaction to the Slido questions. So over to you, Patrizia.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you everybody again for a good number of replies, ideas coming in from the involvement of all actors, youth, all voices in bottom-up strategies, the idea of the one-stop shop for the access to services, hubs, labs, creative spaces for community has coming as a big cluster in the replies, the access to the 5G, an essential right for rural areas, referring to rural funding, the smart villages. Erasmus Plus for rural areas has been also a very popular action recommended. Get policymakers to understand rural development is way more than agriculture, and food also higher on the agenda, because also food is way more than agriculture. Invest on capacity building on the ground, but also in the intermediaries and the local knowledge transfer, train the trainers. Continue the positive narrative, the place and people-based approach, guarantee leader approach, not only inside CAD, but earmarking it across other funding. I will now continue. What I would like is very quickly actually to give the opportunity for those of you that would like to comment, and perhaps also I would invite to the winner in terms of votes, because it's a winner in terms of vote, but it's actually something that has been repeated severally across the comments, a rural pact in every member state with the support from the EU, really like local, regional, plans that mirror the EU Rural Pact. So perhaps, I don't know if
VLM?
Stephanie from the VLM would like to make very quickly just a comment on that.
There's a microphone coming over to you here.
Yeah, so a very short comment. Actually, it's coming back every time. Last time with the conference, also this year and also yesterday, we said that there should be a rural pact in every member state. Yesterday, we looked to the policy briefing, and also as well in Flanders, and like Kevin also promotes, we started with the Flemish Rural Pact. We looked at the policy briefing. We also using those 7 ingredients. We also was hearing, we were listening to other member states, what is going good, what is going less good. And actually, for the moment, we are very happy about our process, and I can only support every member state for doing the same as us.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for your input on this, for keeping short, so that we can also still act for other inputs. Perhaps I would like to ask Pavel, my colleague Pavel. You said this comment. We say to decision-making, rural development, they hear agriculture, the Commission negotiates need to policies to misunderstand the rural development. Would you? Over there.
Yeah, this comment really goes to the heart, I think, of the issue around the proposal that's been made by the Commission. I can understand the logic that various people, the Commissioner, the Executive Vice President, Mario Miluchev, everyone was making about the flexibility that is being offered as part of the plans after 2028. But my experience is that when those who make decisions about issues crucial to rural areas are being made, that those people think only of agriculture. As part of the Polish presidency, we had this huge 1,600 people, 3-day event on rural development. And it was 3 days on rural development except for 2 panel sessions. One was the agricultural chambers, and that's okay. They are a lobbying group for their industry. The other panel session that said nothing about rural development, but spoke only of agriculture, were the ministers of agriculture. And that is my main concern.
Thank you very much, Pavel. There are a lot of comments also about capacity building, and there is a concrete one from Guillaume. Okay. Would you like to say something? Laura, about that? No? Okay. Maybe then Vanessa Halhead. I think you wanted also to comment.
Down on left. Hi. I think everything has been said at least 100 times. I mean, I wanted, first of all, just to start with a reflection that it appears that we all agree about the main things. This included all of the speakers from the commissioners to the DGs to all of the commission side of things to the people in the audience. They all had the same key words in it. In a way, I wonder, so why is it not easier than it is to achieve the things that we all want? What are the barriers, and we've not looked at that, to achieving it, and what are we doing about them? So that is a question, actually, rather than a proposal, but I think looking at the reasons why all of these policymakers, and there's probably none left in the room, I don't know, don't go away home now and just write their policies on the back of what we've all said we all agree with, but we know that won't happen. I mean, all I can say is that I agree absolutely with Ben Van Essen. We are part of the same organisation, European Rural Community Alliance, part of the European Rural Parliament, which is happening in a month's time in Scotland. And it's all about looking at building, enabling circumstances for rural communities to do what they are doing anyway and what they know they need to do. And not creating false kind of prescriptions or constraints or bureaucracy which make it harder, because rural communities, generally speaking, are getting on with doing the things they need to do. And we had a workshop today on volunteering, and volunteering is a massive thing across very many countries. It's a huge resource financially for the governments and for the European Commission that so many people do so much work without any pay. They need to have the enabling circumstances, not being told what to do. And I think often our programs coming from the Commission veer more on saying we want one of these and one of those and more of the other, rather than actually saying, we trust you. You know what's right. You know what you need to do. We trust you to do it. But we know that you need to be enabled to be able to both self-govern your own work and to get the sort of circumstances surrounding you which make that easier. So I think a lot of it would be about looking at what enables rather than what prescribes to rural communities. Anyway, Scotland is happening in a month's time, and we will be talking about these things from a very bottom-up point of view.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is there anybody who would like to make a point that has not been said at this point? As Vanessa pointed out, a lot of ideas have already come out in the different panels. Edina? Short, please.
Sorry, just maybe one thought related to Vanessa was asking, that I think it's quite interesting that we did an exercise in a quite representative group, like what level of power people feel they have. So how far they agree with the declaration statements, which is kind of the ideas, the Rural Pact Declaration that we are stating here, and how far they feel they have power to influence policy. Don't know if it works. Yeah. So I think the interesting thing is that most of the people we asked actually said they feel they really have low power in influencing policy. And I think, Vanessa, what you're asking somehow is connected to that. And that was even true in the Rural Pact Coordination Group, where the picture was more positive, but still showing that people don't feel they can fully influence the policy process. So I think or interest representation and power is something that we need to think further about.
Thank you, Edina. Anybody else for a very, very, very short one? Last one, perhaps?
Thank you very much. Andrzej Hałasiewicz, Poland. Listening to the discussion, even on this session, through the whole event, again, I have a strong confirmation that we in the rural Europe, we need separate, independent rural development policy. This so-called second pillar is to some extent a big lie. As Paweł Krzyczunowicz said, in fact, ministers of agriculture are always focusing on agriculture. And rural development, which is behind of it, is treated like something what is just making troubles. So I appeal again, we need independent rural or local development policy, European development policy. It also could be a tool which gives more power to local people. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for contributing, for not being shy and sharing your ideas. I hand it back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Patrizia. And again, thank you for all your comments. And if you could show a round of applause and thanks to our wonderful panelists. You are free to go. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.